All right, I think we're live. Find out here in a minute. I've got some people in the chat. We're doing well. Bob's here, Dave Redlin. Awesome. Douglas. Paul is here. John's here. Vincent, Doug. Oh, we're doing well. Awesome. So the crowd is building, and I want to welcome you guys to No BS Woodworking Tuesday Tips. Tonight, I'm going to play around here with a couple of different methods of doing some line and bury inlay. I spent almost my entire life until I went to work for Pop Wood, living in Chester County, Pennsylvania, which is a county that's basically directly west of Philadelphia. In fact, there's only one county in between, and that's Delaware County, which until the early 1700s was actually part of Chester County. So this type of inlay that you've got going on here in this country is pretty much, it's not completely isolated to that area, but it's prominent in the Chester County area. And some of it was occurring like sort of into that Delaware County area, so a little bit closer to Philly. It's got its roots in Wales and Scotland, and you'll find similar sort of things going on there. And as it progressed here, it sort of made its way west and then south and down through the Shenandoah Valley, and then ultimately down into North Carolina and that kind of stuff, where the designs continued to morph, not so much the process. So tonight, that's really what I wanted to focus on, was process of how to excavate the channels for the line and bury inlay, more so than anything else. I do have a YouTube video that is from many years ago. If you look back through my content, you'll find it on how to make the stringing. I still make it that way today, and it's pretty easy. Mike Michelli thought this was all about Chuck Berry, which is not exactly the same thing, but it is close. I forgot to ask if you guys can hear me. Evidently you can, because Brian Monk said something about Go Scotland. There's not much that comes from there. It's primarily a Welsh thing. They had, it was line and dot, and then they would have line and flower or line and diamond, those kind of things you'll see on Welsh pieces. So first thing I wanted to do before I jump into what we're doing here is say thank all of you for the patience with my mishap for last week, for telling you I would be here when I knew I wasn't going to be. So and yes, I've gotten lots of questions about how I could forget my wife's birthday. I didn't. I forgot to tell you that I wouldn't be here. And I just naturally said, I'll see you guys next week, and this is what I'm doing. And I actually had to go back on Friday before I left for Connecticut to teach a class I had to watch the end of what I did to make sure that I actually said what I thought I said, which was I'll see you guys next week. So I had to change my email. Actually, that was the week before. Yes, Mike. I love you too, buddy. But the closest you're going to get is Chuck making berries. We're actually not going to make any berries tonight. We're going to do some line excavation. The other thing I wanted to let you guys know, right up front, I was showing you guys stuff with the micro fence stuff last week. I'm going to show you some stuff with the Lie-Nielsen tools, which are no longer made by Lie-Nielsen. They're made by Red Rose Reproductions. These are the Steve Latta line and berry tools. I've also got, you know, a homemade one here that I'll show you when we get there. All of the tools I use, all of the things I'm showing you guys, nobody pays me to promote their products. So I'm not, all of this stuff, you know, is either things that I bought and I would use, or things that, like the shaper, it's on loan to me because I went out on the road for the shows. Technically, I don't own it, but I would certainly buy one if they said tomorrow, hey, we would like that back. Because there's just a massive number of things here. So I'm not obligated to anyone to promote their products. And I wanted to say, I really like the microfence stuff, the accuracy and everything that I talked about in the last episode of this is all stuff that I believe in. I want to recommend products that if you guys go buy them, you're not going to come back to me and say, well, that was a complete piece of crap. Why did you tell me I should have that? And that's the case with this. And I also want to thank Rich at Microfence, because he either was watching live and wasn't logged in, or he watched it immediately after. The next day, I got a phone call saying, hey, you didn't have that light on the Microfence, on the micro plunge base. I'm sending you one. So tonight we have a light on there, so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I do appreciate that. Thanks, Rich Wedler from Microfence. So the light ring is a game changer on that, on their bases. So if you end up getting yourself one of those, make sure you buy the light kit. It does make things so much better when you're working with them. Now, end of commercial. Even though I'm not getting paid to do a commercial, those come from YouTube. If you're watching this the day after, you'll have commercials, because it's how I get paid to sit here and do this for 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, wherever we kind of end up. So this is the start of, technically they would have called it a chest, but it's really a Bible box. Bible box is a much later term that we've given this thing. It's a document box or a chest, and it's based off of a real one that was made in the 18th century. And I've got a whole bunch of inlay on it. And what I did, so I'm going to put this down below now because we're done with it. I gave you a little bit of the history. I'm going to show you a couple of photographs real quick, and it's going to show you a little bit more detail. The second photograph is the one I really want you to look at. So let me bring this up here. So this that you're looking at right now, hopefully, it's a door off of an 18th century Chester County spice box. In the form that you're seeing it there, that's me holding a camera directly over top of it and pointing at the floor. If I hadn't edited it out, you would have seen my toes. Well, the toe of my shoe. Somebody turned it into a tabletop. So this is actually owned by Lee Allen Griffith. It's probably one of the nicest spice box stores I've seen. And I don't know if I can expand that. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. No, it's not changing. Customize, let's see what it does. Size, let's see if I can increase the size here. Oh yeah. What I want you to look at, and it's not evident on this one, so we'll switch to the other one. So this is a partial door off of a spice box that a friend of mine who's an antique dealer had. Skip Chalfant had this. It's probably the most outrageously gorgeous door I have seen. No, I can't move it. But what I want you to see is in that, if you look sort of in the center of those, you see the vines making the radius and coming around and ending in the berries. If you look at the one on your lower left-hand side, you can see very distinctly in the middle of the radius the dot for the compass. And that, to me, is the thing that is the most important here. They call this stuff compass inlay. And this was a conversation that I had with Glenn Huey years and years ago. He wanted to know how I did the inlay for Line and Berry, and I said, well, you know, they call it compass inlay, duh, so I use a compass. I'm going to bring my other camera over, and we'll get a close-up of this. I may have showed you guys this before, and then again, maybe not. I just don't remember. It's been one of those days, one of those weeks. All right, so it's been about a month. I'm going to try and get that on camera and change the camera so you guys can see. And I don't know why I don't. Do I see the chat anymore? No. Dave Redland says Chester County has a great collection of spice boxes, and you would not be wrong. In fact, I think it's the largest collection of spice boxes in the country. And it's open to the public. You can go in and see it. There is a charge to get in there. It's awesome. I think Dave is referring to the fact that, was it last year, you guys, the SAPFM, Society of American Period Furniture Makers, held their mid-year conference at Ursinus College, which is about half an hour or so north of the Chester County Historical Society. So Vincent wants to know what makes those two panels so beautiful in my mind. Well, what would make them really beautiful is if I actually had the berries put on there so that you could actually see. Oh, you mean the ones I showed you. It's the complexity of it, the quality of the inlay. They were, you know, if we look at that first one, just the geometry and the symmetry of it all is really, it's pretty amazing. And this was done. There are a lot of shops that did it and did this type of inlay in Chester County, and the shop that did this is probably the one that has the highest level of quality. I'm going to shrink that back down again to 100%, or 99% is good enough for me. Get rid of that, bring back the chat window. There we go. And I mean, you can just see it's giving contrast without being overly ornate. To me, it's a very pleasing decorative design. You're seeing the contrasting woods against that plainer background, yet it's not like a lot of the marquetry and things that you'll find on stuff in the more cityfied pieces. Yes, the lines on the panels are so fine, and that's what makes this shop in particular on this that did this. The pieces that come from this shop tend to have thinner line, the vines part of this, all of that stuff that leads to little clusters of berries. And if I go back to that, the other door, this is only a partial. I guess I could have pulled up the full shot of the spice box for you, but well, I didn't. It's live, once again, not edited for your viewing pleasure. So this one, the stringing is a little thicker than on the other piece, but just everything that they did on this piece to add decoration to a piece without being really ostentatious, to me, is the thing that I like the most about it. I really like the idea that Line and Berry can really dress up a very plain piece without being super fancy. You could put these things into just about any kind of a decor, and they're not gonna stand out from across the, well, they will stand out from across the room, but they're not going to be obnoxiously so. If you look at some of the heavily marquetry faced pieces that were made at that time or slightly later, they're very, very formal pieces, and you need to have, if you stuck that into a country farmhouse, it would kind of look out of place, where this stuff would look, sort of complementary to just about any kind of a decor. So I'm going to go switch over now to the other camera, if I can figure it out. And it's almost on camera there. So like I said, I may have showed this to you before. They call it compass inlay. So what I have is probably the cheapest pair of dividers I could find at one of the big box stores. I don't even think there's, nope, it's not even engraved with a manufacturer's name. So as my friend Ron would say, it's probably from that grand manufacturing company called China. And what I did was I ground the one leg down to a finer point, and then the other one I ground to a straight cut, and it's going to be almost impossible to see here. I'm going to try and get this under there to boost it up so that I can keep it stable, and then I'm going to try and zoom in on that. It'll be the leg on the right. So if I can get in a little closer without it just completely blurring, what you should be able to see is I took and filed, no, not that way. So it's filed on a bevel, right? So you can see the angle coming back. And what's almost impossible to see in the video, simply because it's so small, is I took a triangular saw file and I filed a V. So if I were to look straight on at that thing, you should be able to see a tiny little V right at the end of that leg. And what that does is it forms two spurs on here. And I'll show, and this wooden bracket that I have on there was because when I made this and I started using it, because I bought that China made set of dividers, they're pretty flimsy. So what this is it's a stiffener, and you can see I made it and then drilled it out for multiple size radii. So, and it's just a pair of wing nuts with just a couple of boards on either side of the things. And what it does is it holds this. The radius is a lot stiffer. If I start to pivot on my center point and this twists, what happens is the radius changes diameter, or radius changes, the dimension changes on the radius. It's been a long day, folks. All right. So the first thing that I do when I'm going to do this, if I'm going to sit down and be honest with you guys, which I usually try to do, is I start to lay things out, whatever my pattern's going to be. So I've got, actually this one's set to 1.5 inches, which is the size that I wanted to show you tonight, because I've got 4 different tools that are set to the 1.5 inches. I forgot to set this one. Once again, not edited for your viewing pleasure. Let's see if I can get that in there. Yep, kind of like that. Yeah. I know my hand's in the way. Get used to it. There we go. So that's about 1.5 inches. And what you'll find is the patterns, there's a lot of geometry involved. They would step things off with a set of dividers on the panel. They would then start to pop things around, bringing in larger diameters to create that set of berries. Let me grab that other. I have a top here that's partially laid out for that box. Yes, I know. I'm off camera. Wasn't on it to begin with. Yeah, you can barely see my white lines on there. So again, this is all laid out. I plotted out a specific number of divisions here. What you can't see, I'm betting, are the orange lines that run. They look like they're about 1 inch or so apart. And well, yes, they are 1 inch apart. Shocking. And they run, and then there's an orange border around here that would be the final string that goes around this. But here I've got the blue in that corner. We've got the two arcs crossing. You've got a tulip. Again, very sort of Pennsylvania themes going on here. And some more of the lines or the vines that would come in and rotate in and back out, and then the berries all have to be drilled and put in, but that's a completely different show. We can route the holes for the berries, but then they're all the same. So if I go back to those photos, which I'm not going to do at the moment, you can scroll back tomorrow. You'll be able to see on those two doors that I had the berries are not in a uniform thing. They would basically set in the two cluster, and then put those in, and then come back in and drill the final alternate color berry. And a lot of times, what they would do is overlap them. Sometimes they don't. They were not absolutely flawlessly placed every single time. So all I wanted to do was show you that if I'm going to do something, really what I'm going to do is spend my time. I tend to mark out, because most of this stuff was done on walnut. I tend to spend my time drawing it out using white because it's pretty easy to see. I can do a lot of things with it. And it also gives me the beginning of my pivot points for the radius tools, depending on which hand tool I am using or which power tool. The big thing with the Shaper Origin, which is the last thing I'm going to show you, is that I can set it to drill those, but it's probably just easier to set a compass or take an awl and go back and do them. So if I were to scratch this in using my tool here, now again, that leg is beveled. The long point is on this side, right? So if I can, and you can see I'm kind of falling on my, I'm going to bring it in this way. And yes, I'm just doing this in the middle. I'm not going to scratch a whole lot here. The first thing I'm going to do, so the short side of the bevel is on this side of the leg. So I'm actually going backwards. So if I were to start where those two cross and go backwards, what you should be hopefully able to see, if I can stop whipping the camera around on you guys and then bring it in tight there, is you should see that there is a scratch line on this side, and then a scratch line over there. This is a really small cutter on here. As I recall, this is about 1 millimeter wide. So what I've done, those two spurs that I created with the with the triangle saw file, create two sharp spurs that then slice through the material so that I don't get ragged edges. And then if I turn around and I come back in the other direction using the long face of this thing, I can excavate that scratch. And what it does is it leaves behind. Oh yeah, that's what that you guys wanted to see my see the tripod for my camera, I'm sure. Let's try that again, folks. The lock on this tripod loosened up evidently. So once again, because, you know, not edited for your viewing pleasure, if I come back the other way, you know, so initially I went backwards and it scored the fibers. And now if I just bring the tool back the other way, oh, that was the other photo that I wanted to show you, but I forgot. So the question is, how deep do you go? And I did some repair work. And if you look on my blog, it's got to be relatively close to the last post that I did, which probably is 5 years ago at this point. Somewhere back in there, you'll see where I did some work on using some old drawers, and we were that central diamond that was on that other top. I took a section of it out in order to plug it because somebody had different kinds of brass holes on there. And what I found was that particular piece, that shop, made these pretty deep. They were about 3/16, which is pretty amazingly deep for sitting there with a hand tool scratching that away. So the cool thing about that tool is the way that I have that leg ground, I have both sides of it fairly parallel. So I can keep scratching and work my way down as pretty much as deep as I want to go. I have about that leg on that side there is about 1/4 of an inch. So I can go down in there a solid 1/8 or 3/16 if I want to sit there and scratch that much away. If we look at the Lie-Nielsen Red Rose Reproductions tool, what you're going to see is it's got a V as well, but it's the cutter is more filed like a crosscut saw. So there's no set to the teeth, but there is some fleam, and the two spurs actually do the same thing that my cutter does. The big difference is it's a V-shaped cutter coming down in there. So the problem I've got is if I try and go that deep, and I would know I'll move the camera because sooner or later somebody will watch this later in the week on YouTube and complain because I was showing you the let's open that up a tiny bit. Let's see where I fall. So I want to go right there, right into my existing channel. So I'm going to drop that point right in. So if I cut with this, you can see it's doing the same kind of thing with the spur and creating a slicing cut on this side and a slicing cut on that side. But now the deeper I go, I can just work it back and forth. And it'll just make that channel deeper. The big problem that I have with that is if I'm going to try and get down there to any significant depth, even an eighth of an inch, that because that cutter is tapered the way that it is, it's wider up here than it is down there at the bottom. The deeper I go, the more the sides of the cutter are going to drag on my channel, and the more likely it is that it's going to tear up around that radius. So it's going to leave slightly more of a ragged edge out here. So this tool is really made for going in a 32nd or a 16th, and then just sort of leaving it alone. I probably wouldn't go a whole lot deeper than what I have right there. Just personal. Frank says that reminds you of the scratch stock with a compass. Correct. Very similar. Pete wants to know, do you make a left and right side cutter for the small area of the divider? No, I don't. I'm assuming you're asking about this tool, and I don't make a left and right handed one. I've always just used this the way that you see it, and it never seems to be a problem. I find this one easier to use for me because I'm more centered. I'm going to try and back up a little bit so you can see my hand. Hopefully I'm not showing you the messy shop. I tend to stay more centered than I do with this one. I know that center of gravity is a whole lot lower on this, but I tend to walk the point out of the center hole a little more personally. So there's another point that I have, a center point that I have for this one. I could adjust this so that it's got the longer point in there, or I could probably take my cutter up a little bit higher. You can see once I start to bury that point in there, the tool is kicked down on this side, which to me makes it easier to walk out of the groove. So personally, like I said, I and maybe it's because this is what I used for 25 years before this one came along. You know, this is easy to sharpen. It's easy to maintain. I can go buy another $5, probably $10 pair of dividers now, and file them down, and I can make any size groove that I want for my stringing. And the stringing did vary a bit in thickness. What I have found is most of the pieces that I've looked at, it's just slightly under a 16th. This cutter is a 1 millimeter cutter that I have in there. I don't know what cutters Red Rose is making for them. I know that the cutter that came with this was about a 40th of an inch, because that's Steve uses standard sheets of veneer, commercial veneer, which is right around a 40th of an inch, and that's what he uses to make his stringing. He actually uses a slitting cutter to form the strings, and that way this cutter is much thinner. But I've also got a 16th inch version of this that I've used too, because some of the stringing that I've seen is up around a 16th. So, all right, we got through that. Let's take a look at the next one. Switch cameras while I move junk around. There we go. All right. So wasn't that fun? Yeah, so both tools are great. They both work. Like I said, I got used to my compass, my dividers. I have used the Lie-Nielsen tool a fair amount since I got it, which was quite a long time ago at this point. The next thing I wanted to show you was basically the plunge base with the cutter set on there. This was really the impetus for this, because I was showing you guys the plunge router stuff last week or 2 weeks ago. Last episode, if you're watching it now or just before this one, it was just prior to this, and we had talked a little bit about the line and bury inlay, and I said something about this being such a great tool for doing that, and it really is. I can set this, and I'll bring that camera back in, and we'll take another look. There are other companies that make similar things. You could also buy the edge guide with the circle guide attachments, and you'll see how that works here in a minute, for just about any router you can find. So it doesn't have to be their router or router plunge base, but you can buy that stuff. So I'm going to switch this over. Yeah. There we go. All right, so the edge guide comes in. Well, I got a zoom button on this thing, yet I'm trying to move the tripod closer to my bench. So there you can see so this is the edge guide, and it's got these two rods that mount directly into the base here. Like I said, you can buy the edge guide and use it on an awful lot of commercial routers. It does not have to go on a micro fence plunge base. And then it's got, this is normally where the fence sits for the edge guide, and you just unscrew it, and then this block fits in there with this center pin. And because it's mounted on here, I mean, you can see if I loosen up the edge guide, I can actually get to the point where I'm going to cover up my bit. That's good. If I were to drop that down, you can see it's kind of it's in that same plane with the bit. So I can really get tiny, tiny circles. Because now that I've done that, I've just changed my diameter from what I had set. So I need to reset it. Come on, you. All right, there we go. I'll bring this forward. And then grab my ruler again. And now I can set this out to the 1.5 inches. And the reason I'm setting it at 1.5 inches is because that's not an uncommon dimension for some of the vine work on this stuff. Okay, so lock that in. The great thing about this tool is I can now turn around if I needed to. Let's get that up and out of the way before I break the bit off. There we go. If I need to, I can loosen this, and then I can micro adjust it, a thou or a half a thou at a time to change the radius until everything matches up. Because you saw when I was tinkering with those two other tools, I had scratched this line first. I had these 2 points set from my, get it on camera. There we go. So I had these 2 center points already set up when I did the compass on there, but my pencil lines kind of overlapped funky, so they were not quite in the perfect place. So once I scratched this side, I took the Lie-Nielsen tool, set it into my center point, and then I readjusted the radius until it joined with the other channel perfectly. Right. So those are good. Those are really good aspects of doing this with the hand tools. The major drawback to the hand tools for me is if you're doing a big chest of drawers with a ton of drawers and a ton of inlay in there, you got to scratch them all by hand, and it's not a rapid process. So if I wanted to do the same kind of thing here, And I'm going to just create a, at that point, what I need to do is kind of drop this down. Let's see if I can't make one over here that'll kind of match. So I'm not sure if you can see it. No, you can't. But I'll move the camera and see if we can't get it on the screen somehow. What I'm going to try and do is, now that I've got that 1.5 inch set up for my radius, I'm going to bring my tool down, my bit down, and I'm going to make it just fall right into the channel that I did with the Lie-Nielsen tool. And then I'm going to set my center. So now I have a little center point there, and I have a choice. I can just take an awl and make that a little bit deeper, or I can take a 1/16 inch bit and drill it like that. Yes, Rich, I am aware. Not only did he offer to send me the light ring for this tool, but he also said, hey, you know, normally you drill an 1/8 inch hole in there. Well, that 1/8 inch hole would be a huge hole on a line and bury inlay piece. So you can see when I'm working on this that both of these holes are significantly smaller. So normally I would just take an awl and deepen that hole a little bit so that the point of the micro fence will fit down in there a little better. I guess I could also, and then there's these little outriggers that are on there that help keep everything sort of where it's supposed to be, you know, level. Without those, this thing wants to tip forward a lot. So, and again, he makes an outrigger setup for just about every router. Well, you can modify the router to make them fit. That's the key. It's a standard accessory. Okay, so all I got to do is turn this on. Drop it down and lock it in place. Okay, and with that center point accentuated there, this is about sorry, making everybody sick, moving that camera around so rapidly. So this bit's about a 1/16 of an inch. So I mean, you can see it's significantly wider. The groove, the channel, is significantly wider than that 1 millimeter. Most likely about 50%. So that's, Andrew says, Red Rose email, October 22nd, we have also restocked a full array of cutters for the ladder inlet. Both radius tool and the straight line cutter have a 031, 042, and an 062. So they go up to a 1/16. Like I said, this is about a 1 millimeter bit. You can see it's small, considerably smaller. And what I have in the shaper origin, which is what I'm going to show you over here, is more of this size than the size on the two hand tool cutters. So to me, when I look at this, again, this is actually that's an 063 bit. So it's 5 thousandths over a 1/16, which would make putting the string in there, as long as I get the right one, that's probably it. No, I picked up no, that's the 16th. No, it's a little under. It's got to be this one. I thought I had a 1/16 inch string here. Yeah, that's the 16th inch string. And I mean, you can see it goes in fairly easily. And the great thing about a 16th inch is it's still flexible enough that you're not going to have to use an awful lot unless you're doing really tight radii. You don't really have a ton to, you don't have to break out the heating iron or anything like that to rotate it around. I mean, you saw that's a 16th at a 1.5 inch radius, and I very rapidly and easily bent it around that curve with no trouble at all. And the 1 millimeter is even thinner, so it'll go around like with no trouble. Easy peasy, right? Adding a little heat to it and putting a pre-bend in some of this stuff is not necessarily a bad idea. Who makes the bit and collet for the Dremel? Well, the collet for the Dremel is already a 1/8 inch collet. So you should be able to get that on camera. Let's see if I can't make it stay. So, yeah, of course, my pointer is in all the wrong place. So it's a 1/8 inch shank bit. The Dremel comes with a 1/8 inch collet on it already. The bits I got from inlaybandings.com. I think I may have put a link to them down in the show notes. Haven't really been doing any of that nonsense lately because, well, since the beginning, because that would change the amount of time that I have to spend doing with this. But since I had the extra week on this week's show, I had actually put that stuff up long before this show happened. So there's links to Microfence. There's a link to the Red Rose tools. There's links to the shaper. And I believe if there isn't, I'll put one in later on tonight. As soon as we wrap up here, I'll put one into inlaybandings.com so that you guys can get to the bits. We established that last week that you can also buy them off of Amazon, and they are circuit board drills. They're pretty small. I mean, you can see it's a little spiral upcut carbide bit. Like I said, this one's 0.063. I do have 0.625s. I've got 1 millimeter. I've got 1/32. So they make them pretty small. And, that, once again, light ring, no light ring. It's an amazing, it makes a huge difference in how you can see and work with the tool. So no light. It looks like there's a lot more shadows on the camera, but trust me, I can see absolutely everything that's going on right there. No problem. And that's really where you need to see it, is where the bit meets the material. All right. Let's talk shaper origin very briefly, and then we'll run this thing. Come on, you. Switch cameras. Let's go. All right. So, as Andrew just asked, what about the split collar? So, as we talked about before, when I was talking about the, in one of the things that I did about the shaper origin, this is a standard Festool based trim router motor. So it comes with a 1/4 inch collet. Let me grab, yeah, all my stuff is in the way now. I should have had one of these laying out for you, but I didn't. But I've got one right here, maybe. Yes. So this is an Amana. I'll bring in the camera and we can show you. All right. As much as I'm attempting not to have the camera on screen and move it around while I'm doing this, because that just makes everybody seasick. Come on, you. So Amana makes these. There's lots of other companies that make these. Once again, I own this. I bought it. I'm not promoting it. They don't pay me. You can buy them from inlaybandings.com. Matt's got them on his website. Literally, it's an outside diameter of 1/4. They drilled an 1/8-inch hole through it, and then they ran a saw down the side to split it so that when you tighten this up in a collet, it'll grab the 1/8-inch bit. That's it. Pretty easy. Not, don't stress too much. So that's just an adapter that you can buy for your 1/4-inch collet router, which is what is in the Shaper Origin. And that's what I have set up here. I have no light on that, so it's going to be harder to see. But that's what I've got in there. So I've got the same exact 0.063 bit in there. Right now it's set for an air cut. So if I bring this up, I should actually, no, actually that's not a bad position to see that in. But I'm going to raise the legs on the tripod just a little. Oh yeah, you're seeing the dirty old shop, sorry. And now you're seeing nothing but, let's come that way. Lower that side. Oh yeah. Nothing like trying to, oh, Monk says Shaper sells a collet for it too. I'm sure they do. I can't imagine that they probably even sell metric. All right, so what I've got is, if I back this up, you'll see on the screen the tulip and then the two little antenna coming out there, the vines with the little clusters of berries at the ends. This is a Brian Monk's production here. He sent this to me. This is something we have been talking about for going on 2 years, I would imagine. And you guys can thank him in the chat. I'll give you his street address if you want to show up and beat him up in person. It'll be down in the show notes. So, and I would be very appreciative. In fact, there might be free tools in it for anybody that does. So, so this is just an SVG file that I brought in, set it up here. You can see I've got no, you can't see it in the background because the camera's up too high, but you can see I've got a tape board butted up against my my top here. And now what we're going to do, without further delay, you like that one, Monks, huh? Just drive by his house and throw toilet paper all over it. That's all you need. I'll like I said, I'll leave the street address in the show notes. I don't have the shield on here. Obviously, I don't. I was actually figuring on shooting it from the other side. I wanted to make sure that there was nothing in the way, so that you guys can see what's happening here. It's a pretty straightforward thing. I'll do 2 lines. Once I'll show you with it running. So the first thing I did was went to my cut, and then I went to Z touch, and then hit automatic, and it's going to come down and read the top of my board. I am not touching the machine, even at that with that 063 bit in there. It wanted to do it automatically. So I haven't tried it lately. I seem to recall when I threw in a 1 millimeter or a 1/32 inch bit, I had to do it manually until it touches, because you're more likely to break the bit on the touch. And all that was telling me is where my 0 point is, so it knows how to make the depth. So I'm going to set my depth at 5 thousandths. So I'm not going. No, that's 50 thousandths. 0.005, 2 zeros. Thank you. So I'm going to do the top antenna coming off of there. So I'll just turn this on. Well, that was silly. It turned. All right. I went over it a couple of times. I was trying to go a little deeper, and it's just annoying me that it wants to take that turn. This is that spot where we've got two lines coming in at crossing one another right at this point. But I mean, you can see what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and do this section. I'm going to bring the camera up onto the screen so you can see what I'm following, so that you've got an idea of how this. Let's see. Will it focus? There we go. I'm not going to go very far because it'll be off screen in no time. So if I turn this on, so what I previously followed was this blue line that's going up and around there. It ain't liking that, so it's going to want to go into that V, up. So this is the top of that tulip. I'm going to come out of there, and then I'm going to come back here and show you where I wanted to show you to begin with. Yeah, we don't need that noisy thing on anymore. All right. So you can see, you know, what I've got happening there, and I'm trying to get it so that I can see it on the camera as well. You know, this is the top of the tulip, comes across the peak of the tulip, and then that other leaf side. I didn't do the bell, obviously, and then these are the two antennae that were on there that come out, and there's two clusters of berries there. The great thing about having all of that in an SVG file is I can scale it up or down to fit whatever drawer or top or anything else. I'm going to switch cameras here because there's no sense in you guys. Yeah, you're going to see the camera. So I can scale it up or down to fit whatever piece I am decorating. It doesn't have to be a specific size. So the great thing about having that stuff in an SVG file for the shaper is if I build a piece and I have drawers that are similar in size but not exactly the same size, or so I have a 5-inch drawer and a 6-inch drawer, but they're all the same width. I can take that into that program, and actually 5 and 6 probably wouldn't be enough that even in the period they wouldn't change it. But if you went from a 5-inch drawer on top to a 10-inch drawer on the bottom, but the length never changes, you can scale that in only one direction and make it for a much wider piece. Or let's say I was making a smaller, if I was going to make 3 or 4 of these Bible boxes, and my material only yielded, let's say it's 14 by 20, but I had one where the case sides only came in at, 13. So my lid's a little different size. Rather than crowd the edge of the top, I can turn around and scale it in one direction or both in order to make the design fit the piece of wood that I have. Way easier than it is with the hand tools. So that's, sorry, I just muffled everything with my mic. I'm sure it was very pleasant. So that those last cuts on here with that were at 10 thousandths. So I could go down another 10 or 20 thousandths on there and have enough that I could set the stringing in whatever depth I want. If I went very slight on all of this stuff because, well, it's a nice piece of walnut and it's still a little over thickness for the lid of one of these boxes. So I can always just mill a little bit off the back, and a few thou off the back isn't going to make any difference. But the key is with all of that stuff, if I come back over to my close-up camera and I show you those radii again, or the loops that I did. Yeah, that means I got to change cameras one more time. You're getting those center points from the tools. Even the micro fence has a center point, which is off camera, by the way. It's got the pivot point for the tool, which is something you don't get on the Shaper Origin, although it would be pretty easy to put that in as a point where you could actually just plunge the tool in to create the dimple and then retract it and you're fine. So really, the big thing with all of this is I wanted you guys to have the opportunity to see the different methods that I've been using to create this stuff. And a lot of people will say that using the Origin is cheating. And I look at it and say, the big thing is it's kind of like this tool. It takes a lot of the tedium out of this process. Like I said, it didn't take a tremendous amount of time to scratch these things, but if you had a ton of it to do, you could be at it for hours and hours. And the older I get, the tougher it is for me to hold on to stuff like that. My hands cramp up a lot more today than they did when I was in my 20s. But then again, everything cramps up a whole lot more than when I was in my 20s. So yeah, there is a certain amount of nostalgia to doing it all by hand. But at the end of the day, it's just, it's just stock removal. It's, if you're going to complain about using the Dremel tool or the Origin to excavate the channels, then you probably ought to give up using a joiner planer and a table saw, because it's the same mentality. It's just applied differently. There's no particular, to me, the skill and the artistic expression in the line and bury stuff is in all the layout. It isn't in the excavating of the channel. and it's about how well you can fit the stringing and what you do with it. How how you compose all of that really is, to me, the craft part of this. So if you don't want to use the power tools, the hand tools are available to you, and they work. I mean, throughout the 18th century, that's what they used. So it's not like the tools aren't available to you. I mean, you can certainly make your own pretty easy, pretty inexpensively. I also have others where I made them, for doing the straight line borders, things like that. And I can show you that at some point in the future, which reminds me, I forgot to look at my schedule to see what I have on for next week. So we are a little over an hour. I'm going to look. I don't think that there were any Black Friday sale on the Origin. I have no idea. Once again, I am not associated with Shaper Origin in any way, other than the fact that they were kind enough to lend me an Origin for the woodworking shows in 2024, and they have also, because I've been doing stuff like this with it and taking it and using it in my classes, whether I teach here or if I'm teaching in Connecticut or anywhere else, I take it along, and I think it's a great. It's another tool for your arsenal, whether you do this with it or whether you're making jigs like I've done in the past on the Tuesday tips thing. It's a great tool, and I've been fortunate enough that they haven't asked for it back, because that's kept a little bit of money in my pocket. So it's great. I like I said, if they ever ask for it back, the first thing I'm going to do is ask them how much they want for it so that I can keep it. We'll go from that. So I'm just running back through the questions, if there are any here. John thinks I like my Coke. We're good. And that's Coca-Cola, not the little powdery stuff. It's probably a detriment to my health. Well, I'm drinking Coke Zero, so it's much better because there's no sugar in it. But I'm sure that whatever artificial sweetener they have there is, but I need that to stay awake tonight. I don't drink coffee. Does anyone use the ladder tool set? Yeah, well, yeah, you saw me. I think we got them all. I think there aren't any real questions there. Legal advice: don't commit to next week. I'm assuming you're an attorney, Vincent. So, but I am committing to next week. I do want to do something every week as we come closer into the holiday season here. There may be weeks that I miss. In fact, I know there will be weeks that I miss because we have some things planned as a family, and I love you guys, but family comes first, and that's just the way it is. So I don't remember what I was going to do next week because it's been a couple of weeks since I've looked at that, because I circumvented, or I preempted what I was going to do in this episode so that I could do the line and berry stuff, because I was on a roll 2 weeks ago, and I don't know if I'm still on that roll or not, but here we are. So thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out for an hour and 8 minutes or whatever it is at this point. I greatly appreciate you guys coming. If you are watching this post live, please like the video, give me that thumbs up, and subscribe. And it really helps the channel, and it really helps me to be able to keep doing this stuff, that my wife is actually seeing a little bit of income from YouTube rather than me just being out here farting around on a Tuesday night. And make sure you hit the subscribe, the notification bell, because you don't want to miss any of this. And I will see you next week. If you haven't signed up for the email notifications, please head to my website and sign up for the newsletter, and you will get an email with, not only as a reminder of that I'll be on next Tuesday at 8, but it'll actually have what the subject is. I would have to go into my mail program to figure out what I have have already set up. So I'm not going to do it. Thanks. Unless somebody's got a ton of questions, which hasn't been the case tonight, I will see you guys next week for whatever it is I'm going to do. Thanks.